Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our East Anglia Monitor Farm summer meeting. Great to have you all here. Fantastic to be able to do this even in a virtual way. Normally we'd be out on farm doing this, we'd be dodging showers like we were at Duxford and at Dis last year, but you're hopefully in the comfort of your own home, got your cup of tea, bacon roll possibly if you're lucky, and ready to join us this morning. We thought this would be a good opportunity to bring together our monitor farms from across the region, to share with you what we do on a monitor farm meeting, to update you all with what's been happening on our monitor farms over the summer, and to delve a bit deeper into some of the questions for this year. So just before we start, just to go through the housekeeping, you're all on mute and your videos are all off, so we can't see you or hear you, but we can definitely talk to you and we want to hear from you. So on your grey panel on the side, you should have a questions box, and in there you can put any questions to me, to any of the panellists that we've got today, and please do use that. That comes through to me and then I can share that with the monitor farmers and Harry and Charlotte we've got today. We're here until 10:30 this morning, and that's to give us plenty of time to have the questions and the discussion. We've got the content from our monitor farmers, and then plenty of time for discussions and questions, but we won't be here after 10:30. The webinar this morning is also being recorded, and so if you want to watch back to any of it or share it with your friends afterwards, that will be available. You'll all get an email with it because you've registered tomorrow, but it will also be going on our AHDB Cereals and Oilseeds YouTube channel, and on there as well there's all sorts of videos that have been happening over the last few weeks and before that as well. The people today, which I'll introduce in a minute, are on here, have all got Twitter handles, so if you want to follow up and ask any questions or tag anyone in them, the Twitter handles are all there for you, and I'll show them again at the end. And hashtag Monitor Farm lets you see what's going on around the country. My colleagues around the country are doing very similar webinars, and so you can see the discussion that's happening elsewhere as well. We have got 2 basis points today, so if you're a basis member and would like to claim your points, in the chat box, if you could please put your name, your basis account number and your postcode, and then we'll register you for those points. We're also hoping to get Naroso points. We haven't yet heard back from Naroso about whether we're eligible or not. We understand they're on furlough leave at the moment, but we very much hope that we will. So again, if you're a Naroso member, if you can put in the chat box your name, your Naroso number and your date of birth and your postcode, we'll also register those points for you as well. So here we are, our Cereals and Oilseeds webinar for our monitor farms. I just thought to introduce you to our monitor farmers. We'd start at the beginning. They'll all introduce themselves to you later, and you've got them across the top of the screen. But just to kind of give you a bit of a background, many of you will have been to one of the monitor farm meetings but not necessarily met the others, and so actually a really nice opportunity to meet everybody. So first up, we've got Tom Mead and David Hurst. Tom and David are just at the end of their 2nd year of being monitor farmers over at Duxford on the Cambridgeshire-Hertfordshire border. Tom and David, we worked together when they applied. We actually put the 2 businesses together. So Tom Mead farms 377 hectares with his father on an arable farm near Foxton, and David Hurst is farm manager for law farming on 1,355 hectares, arable plus sheep and beef enterprises. And David and Tom represent 2 farms at 2 different scales, actually very similar cropping mentality, challenges, opportunities for the future. And so it's been really interesting to do the Monitor Farm programme with both businesses and look at those differences and similarities as we've gone through. We've then got Richard Ling at the Dis Monitor Farm near Dis, up right on the Suffolk-Norfolk border. Richard is farming 400 hectares of arable cropping as well, and has a beef finishing unit for Morrison's and other diversification opportunities as well. Richard's just come to the end of his 1st year and looked at all sorts of interesting things which you'll hear about later today. And then really delighted as well to welcome for their launch in different circumstances to Andrew and Sam Melton, who are going to be our Wisbech Monitor Farm. And Andrew and Sam are going to talk us through their business a bit later this morning. So I'll leave them to do that. But a warm welcome to the East Anglia Monitor Farm family, Andrew and Sam, and we look forward to having you on board and working with you going forward. We've then also got Brian Barker, who's our strategic farm, and Brian covers the East, based down in Suffolk there. And we had a week dedicated to our strategic farm at the beginning of June, and that's all available, and I'll tell you where you can find that later. So the format for this morning is that we've got a series of farm updates for those of you that, and I know most of you have signed in, would do that. We have a farm update we do normally. So Tom and David, Richard are going to talk through what's been happening on the farm since we last met in February, bringing you up to speed with that. Andrew and Sam are then going to introduce you to their farm business and give you an update on their business and what that looks like, how Harvest 2020 has gone so far and the challenges and interest that that's brought, and what they're looking to get out and engage with you through the Monitor Farm programme. We're then going to delve in a bit deeper into our tryouts. So Tom's going to talk through a fungicide challenge that we've been doing over in the East, and Richard's going to talk through some work that he's been doing looking at cover crops and nitrogen. So lots of time for questions and discussion as we go through that, and then plenty of time at the end as well. And very pleased to welcome this morning our guest stars, Harry Henderson and Charlotte Rowley. Both of them will be known to many of you. Harry is our Technical Knowledge Exchange Manager with a strong focus on machinery, precision, data management and managing costs to your benefit. And Charlotte is our crop protection scientist with a specialism in pests, and has been doing all of the work around cabbage stem flea beetle, aphids, and the wider work around that. And I've asked Harry and Charlotte to join us this morning to feed into the discussion, and then to be there to ask any questions that you might have in anticipation of harvest, cultivations, establishment later on in the autumn. So we'll have it quite discussive as we go through this morning, and we want it to be in conversation. As you can see, Tom and Richard, David, Andrew and Sam are all here on their webinars. Harry and Charlotte are there as well, and hopefully we'll be making guest appearances as we go through a bit later. I think I will probably know most of you, but if I haven't met you before, my name's Teresa Meadows, and I work as a Knowledge Exchange Manager covering East Anglia, running the Monitor Farms, the strategic farms, the business groups, and the wider work that we do. So that's probably enough for me to start. Hopefully give you an idea of what we've got for this morning. We just thought, out of interest, we've got 83 of you now live online, and we just thought we'd, out of interest, see which is your local monitor farm that would be local to you, to give us a picture of who's joining this morning. So in a minute, Michelle, my colleague who's here in the background for us, is going to launch a poll, and if you'd be able to click on the screen in front of you, where are you closest to the Duxford, the Dis, the Wisbech Monitor Farms, or have you not been to a monitor farm recently in that area? So which one would you go to normally? So you should be able to click on the screen in front of you, and we'll give that a minute just to do that. So we've got good representation coming in from Suffolk, and good representation coming in from the Duxford Monitor Farms. So if we give it, 77% of you have voted now. So Michelle, perhaps you'd show the responses. You'll be able to see. So there we go. So a good mixture of people, quite a few from the Dis Monitor Farm, quite a few from the Duxford, quite a few from the new Wisbech area, and some of you haven't been to one recently but are joining us this morning. So welcome to you all very much. So Michelle, you can do that. So I'm going to now hand over to our monitor farmers to go through a farm update, and the Duxford Monitor Farmers are first. So David and Tom, if you'd like to take us away with your bit. So over to you, David, to start us off first.
Okay. Okay, good morning everyone. Like Teresa said, my name is David Hurst. I'm the farm manager at Law Farming. I'm in my 8th year there now. On these monitor farm talks, even with Tom and I always seem to end up going first. Thank you, Teresa. So it's nice to see you're carrying on the tradition that even in this, with 7 or 8 people, I'm still number 1. I thought I'd put some pictures up to demonstrate what we've sort of been up to really since our last meeting in February. We'll start off with something not arable. So we purchased a small suckle herd about 2 years ago, and we've been adding to that gently. So I thought I'd have a quick talk about calving and our new strip grazing system. So calving went reasonably well. I think we gave the cows far too much grass or had too much grass in front of them to start with. So we had a few problems calving. Last year on my own, I had no problems at all. We've moved the cows to a compartment grazing system. So there's about 35 cows with calves at foot in that picture. And they get about half a hectare every day or 2 days, depending on what the grass is like. And that's been an absolute godsend during this dry spring. If we just mob grazed the fields, we'd have had nothing left. In fact, this time last year under that system, we were feeding hay, which proved rather expensive at the end of it. I sat down yesterday and I was doing some figures. We've set about 100 acres aside for the cows, permanently fenced around our main farmyard where we keep our machinery and have our workshop. It was quite interesting doing a sort of gross margin comparison and then a full budget against cropping that 100 acres, 40 hectares in winter wheat. The return on the suckle herd as it stands, it was surprisingly not an awful lot less than a very average crop of Group 3 winter wheat on that land. That land's very sandy. If we achieve 8.5 tonnes a hectare on there over 5 years of wheat, we'd be lucky. So that was quite encouraging to see. And I hope at some point to be able to add some value to the beef. And we've bought some more heifers, so next year there'll be about 55 to calve. The next picture on your right is sugar beet. I was out digging around our sugar beet crops 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I can still find seed that hadn't germinated. I hope now that has. We managed to drill all 730 acres of sugar beet in about 2.5 weeks, which is good going. But the dry weather played havoc with germination. Weed control has been an absolute nightmare. And in fact, tomorrow we'll be out spraying 2 fields for the 4th time. We've really struggled to get on top of knot grass. And we took on a farm last year, and unbeknown to me, there's a lot of weed beet in there. So for the first time ever of me growing sugar beet in my whole life, I'm going to have to get a contractor in to do some weed wiping, which is a bit disappointing. The next picture on your right is of our new to us drill. Like everybody else, last autumn we struggled. We have for the last 6 or 7 years run a 6-metre horse pronto drill, which has been a wonderful bit of kit. It's just it got too small for us trying to get round with 240 horsepower on the front. So after a lot of looking, I managed to find a second-hand 9-metre drill, and after about 4 months under negotiation, I managed to get the price down and part exchanged quite a lot of machinery. And that cost us about £6,000 to change after part exchange. My justification was the extra 3 metres should give a huge boost in output today, especially with another hired cat on the front. And I used Harry's excellent, I'll give you a plug here, Harry's excellent machinery cost calculation Excel spreadsheet that you can download from the HDB website. And I plugged in our current system, which was a Fens 724 that we owned from new, and a Horse Pronto 6 DC drill against a hired cast and the new drill and all the purchase prices and outputs. The difference between the two systems in total annual costs after taking into account hiring a second caterpillar for a few weeks was getting on for £13,000. Now that sounds great. That won't save us £13,000 in cash as such, but I think it's the opportunity cost, opportunity lost of being able to get on and do or carry out preams earlier, roll the field a little bit quicker, keep the hours off an owned tractor, and obviously what I hope is a significant improvement in output as well. So that picture was taken just after we got it off the lorry. The next picture along the bottom left is our big horse sprayer. We're in our third out of 5 year our contract hire of that, which is going well. We've had a few niggles this month, which have been sorted out, and I would hate to have had the bill for that, so I'm very glad we stuck with the contract hire. The mixed valves behind it was a bit of a chance. I bought an old valve last year, hoping to convert it, and I looked at the cost of it, and it was prohibitive. That popped up in an email, and again, I was able to part exchange quite a lot of machinery, and that cost us about £3,000. We've had it out a few times, and it's significantly boosted sprayer capacity. The sprayer tank's 8,000 litres, and we can put 12,000 in the mixed Bowser. So we're spread out about 15 miles from one side of the farm to the other, and when you're trying to get through 730 acres of sugar beet in one day, that's allowed us to do that, and that's been fantastic. So very pleased with that. Next picture along is winter barley. That was taken a few weeks ago, and I was shocked at how yellow it was then. That field is on some very sandy mineral ground, and that is very, very yellow. In fact, 2 years ago, I cancelled my holiday and we were coal mining there on the 4th of July. I don't think we'll be quite there this year. But as my father reminded me, a little bit of rain can even everything up, and it might go off even quicker now. But I think we won't be there for another 2.5, 3 weeks. So my guys are very busy and hurriedly cleaning out grain sheds in case we do get going in a couple of weeks. They've all got to pack some holidays in too. So it's been a busy spring. We usually host cereals, and I'm not quite sure how we would have fitted all the work that we do for them in with that. I've been quite relieved not to have to do that this spring, but as always, we're always on the go. So there we go.
Brilliant, thank you, David. Lots happening, lots going on. Harry, I don't know if you've got any more comments about the machinery change or anything in there, questions for David or Tom as we go. It's going to be an early harvest.
I think the point Dave made about drilling capacity, it'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts on drilling dates this year, especially as a lot of people didn't get cropped in last autumn. Are people thinking they're going to go a little bit earlier? I mean, my personal view is we still won't start till October. We've got, there was one barley where we actually had to stop drilling this year because we decided the conditions weren't right. We didn't get back to it for another 2 weeks. But the BYDV in there was staggering, the difference in that with 2 weeks later drilling, and just to kind of practice not rushing out still, as I think there's still plenty of back grass about as well. So interesting to see what other people's thoughts are for that this autumn.
Do you want to pop in if everybody wants to pop in their thoughts on when you might go drilling this year, considerations for blackgrass? Charlotte, I might bring you in there. You want to pop up and just kind of BYDV is going to be important, isn't it? Like you say, Tom and David. I don't know if you just want to mention the BYDV tool, Charlotte.
Yeah, on the website hdb.org/BYDV, we've got a BYDV tool that can just help guide when to apply sprays most appropriately. So if you feel that you do need aphid control in the form of a pyrethroid spray, we'd urge you to use the tool to track the development of the aphid in your crop and make sure that you're applying the least amount of sprays that you need to, because we do have pyrethroid resistant issues in grain aphid, and there's a lot of concern that that's going to get worse. So hopefully with conservative use of these sprays, we can keep them in the toolbox for a bit longer.
You used it last year, didn't you, Tom? You did, David. Yeah, it's quite easy to use, isn't it, Charlotte? You just pop in your drilling date and then it adds up the degrees done.
Yeah, it uses our weather data from the HDB website, and it just tracks the degree day accumulation. So what it's doing is basically tracking the development of secondary generation. So when that secondary generation appears, that's the one that you want to target with sprays, because they're the aphids that are going to spread BYDV. If it's present, they're going to spread it through the crop. So that's why we are tracking them with the degree day model.
There's a question coming for you, Charlotte, I'll ask now. Kind of what non-insecticide work is AHDB doing on BYDV? In with the hard questions on a Friday morning already. Thanks.
So we started a new project last year. It's been led by ADAS, and what they're doing, they're looking at a number of ways to develop decision support systems and improving monitoring of aphids, because as we know, it is quite difficult to monitor aphids in a winter crop. So we want to try and be able to use the suction trap network that that Rothamsted operate, and give greater confidence to what those results mean to aphid colonisation in the crops. And then through that, we're also going to be developing, helping to build on models that were done in the past to track the risk to the crop based on sort of aphid numbers and virus prevalence, and give farmers a better estimation of whether they need to take action in terms of controls. Unfortunately, the main form of control is insecticides at the moment, but we're hoping that as the project progresses, new things will come onto the market that can utilise these models as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then alongside that, Charlotte, there's all the work on the kind of flowering strips and monitoring your natural enemies, and that people can pick up as well, aren't there? Brilliant.
So that working as well. We've got a new PhD starting at Harper Adams this autumn, which I think is going to be really interesting, about looking at the attractiveness of different varieties to the aphids. So investigating whether there's a potential to actually have some varieties that act as a trap crop, maybe around the outside of a wheat crop, that can be targeted with either natural enemies or by pesticides or something like that. So I think that'll be really interesting to look as well.
And Tom, you're looking at, well, David, you've got them in place already with your countryside stewardship margins, and Tom, you're establishing yours. So there's a question coming in about advice on encouraging aphid predators. I don't know, David, whether you have, there are historical ones that you've done stewardship for a long time, but Tom, you've thought quite consciously about where you've put yours as well, haven't you?
Nothing particularly scientific, but you notice walking crops where you've got countryside stewardship, what would have been HLS margins or areas of AB8, which is sort of pollen and not pollen, nectar, species-rich grass and wildflowers. You do notice on the edge of those fields there are a lot more sort of predators about. Yeah, noticeably so in sugar beet fields actually, where we've had problems with aphids this year. I can really see a difference, but not in the middle of big fields. You would have to sow strips in the middle of the fields, I think, to be able to achieve that.
And that's what we're looking at kind of through the strategic farm, linked to flowering strips, and like the Assist project is doing as well, kind of every 100 metres in a field make a difference, and what impact does that have. So a question for you, David, about the cattle. I've got a question about how well the cattle obey the electric fence, and do you plan to grow cover crops and use the cattle to mob graze the cover crops later in the year?
Yes and yes. The electric fence, there are one strand of sort of sheep wire, because we've got hundreds of sheep, so it's what we have lying around. And it's surprising, even if someone goes in the morning and they switch the electric off and don't turn it on to the next day, they don't touch it. And we're at the point now where they're so used to it, you can walk through with them, with two of you, with one piece of wire, and you can separate cows and calves, or you can separate cows out. You can push them towards a crush. Yeah, it's brilliant. I had a friend who I was at university with in Scotland, and he did it, and I sort of got the idea from there. And it's surprising how quickly they become used to it, and they associate you with food, so they know that when you go in there, you're probably going to move them to the next compartment, and they'll let you know. They'll stand and roar at you at the little gate to let them through. So safe for them, safe for us, and really pleased with it. It's worked really well. The grass, I thought we'd get twice as much out of the grass. I think we're getting 3, 4, 5 times more out of the grass, and it's amazing after 2 weeks the difference between the last compartment and the first compartment. It's more than chalk and cheese, I suppose. The cover crops, we've always grown. They've grown here for 50, 60 years. Stubble turnips as a catch crop on the farm anyway, and the last 2 years we've had them without. They never come near a shed. We have outwintered them on stubble turnips, again on this compartment system, which they respond really well to. So this year they'll be on a bale grazing system with stubble turnips. So we've made some haylage this year, wrapped in very sort of small square bales. So the idea is we can roll a couple of ring feeders over every day. We should be able to go out onto a big field with a quad bike, turn the ring feeders over, unwrap the plastic, and then just move them forward once a day. The idea being we never put a tractor or a forklift on the field and make a mess. But yeah, they'll never go near a shed. They're outside. So low input, medium output is kind of what I hope for.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's been a learning because it's the first year you've done mob grazing, isn't it, on the farm? Yeah, with your farm managers. Yeah. Good, right. I've got lots more questions, but I think I will keep going and then I might pick up on these as we go through. So thank you, David. Yeah, lots of insight and good conversation. So we're now going to move on to Tom. And Tom, I think we're going to start, is that right, with your video? I don't know if you want to introduce your video.
Yes, I did a video just to try and, well, new to the farm really, and this was a few weeks ago, so it just gives you a bit of an update on what we're doing, and then I'll pick up on some other points afterwards if that's going to play.
Hopefully.
Good afternoon everybody. We are Friday the 29th of May, just up next to a crop of my peas here. These are Carioca large blues, drilled I think about the second week in March, about the 10th or 11th of March I think. Looking really well, just trying to keep the pigeons off them. They just seem to love them since they've come out on flower. This plot here is an AB8 wildflower margin. You can just see a bit of stuff just coming here. This was drilled after we had about 25 mil of rain, whenever that was, about a month or 5 weeks ago now. So it went into some really nice moisture, and we rolled it straight away. And there's been enough to, you can't see in the shadow, it's been enough to get the grass growing, but it's just sitting there now, not doing a lot. So I'm hopeful that when eventually we do get some rain, it'll still be okay. Just over onto one of our fields of wheat. This was a field of Skyfall that was drilled in early October. It was going to be min-tilled, and we had various problems too wet for our drill to go and too much trash, so we ploughed it, pulled it down, and I was a bit worried that we were going to get quite a lot of black grass come back in it through ploughing. We've been trying to keep those seeds on top the last few years. And here now is the join of where we drilled some hybrid wheat into the middle of this field of Skyfall. You can see the hybrid wheat looking pretty well actually, nice big ears, but it's always looked a bit thinner, but it looks like it's catching up a bit now, and perhaps that ear size will make up for the yield, so we'll see how that does.
Brilliant. A nice introduction there, Tom. Do you want to talk us through your other updates?
Yeah, so that was, hopefully you can hear that all right. It was a bit quiet on my sound. It's just to give you a bit of a flavour of what was happening on the farm beforehand. So just put some pictures here. The first one there, just making the most of the weather. We actually made some couple of hay fields, which was in May, which I've got on Twitter, and people say, "Oh, you can't make hay in May," but it's not burnt the shed down yet. So hopefully that's all right. But I'm in very, very poor crop. Obviously because of rain. You can see the next picture along there is actually that grass margin, which is supposed to be a grass margin that was drilled at the end of April. You know, I went out on a Saturday afternoon after we'd had that 25 mil of rain, whenever that was. I think it was the last time it rained before yesterday. It's looking a lot better than that now. I'm hopeful that that'll be okay. If not, we may have to overseed or reseed a few bits in the autumn. I've got some more to do. That's kind of the main for our farm. We're just trying to get some strips like that link up around the main block, and looking at some of what the assist project is doing and trying to encourage those beneficials further into the fields. So a little way off, but it's a start, and that's all part of countryside stewardship. We've also drilled some 9 mixes last week, and they look fantastic now. We had 25 mil of rain yesterday, and they're just coming up perfectly. So we've got some ale in there. We're hoping to keep that as a 2-year mix, which I'm hoping now with some rain and some hot temperatures that will push on and not get affected too much by flea beetle on that. Yeah, might focus on sugar beet and peas. They have been loving the sunshine, look really, really good. Our sugar beet, we've got slightly more this year than we've had other years because we dropped spring barley. We were planning some spring barley and then managed to get more drilled in the autumn. and increased our area of wheat a little bit. They're looking a lot. That was quite a few weeks ago now, that picture, but I think things were in the east. I think the old saying goes that they should be touching in the rows by the Suffolk show and across the rows by the Norfolk show, which the Norfolk show would be next week. And they're well and truly touching in the rows now, so we're pleased with that. They've had 2 sort of acre approaches, herbicides, and then on one field we actually went back through, we borrowed a hoe off a neighbour. We've never done that before in recent years, but it worked really well actually. The ground had got quite hard and baked out on some chalky land, so we hoed them. So yeah, 2 herbicides and then once through with a hoe, and that's it. Now they're closing the rows, so should be pretty. In the bottom of the piece just emerging was just for those of you that come to our meetings last year, we changed our drill. We've got a weaving Sabertine. I don't intend to use it solely as a direct drill, but this was just a comparison. We left the triangle in a field here. This field was following a cover crop last year. It was actually going to go into beans, but it got too wet, so we put it into peas. The rest of the field was just lightly cultivated with our Cockling all-rounder, very, very cheap cultivation. And then we left the triangle just untouched to direct drill it just to see the difference, and you can hopefully see the difference in establishment there between those 2. And I think it's just highlights the point to me of doing the right thing in the right field and just not being too one-track minded about things. You know, that cultivation probably costs us about £12 a hectare, so the difference there in establishment when you're putting seed in that's £450 a tonne, it was a no-brainer just to do that and create a bit of tilth. So they're looking. I haven't actually got any pictures of wheat on there. You saw some of the wheat in our video. One end of the farm where you've got chalk underneath looks okay. I've been saying for weeks I'm fairly optimistic about harvest, as long as we get rain now. That was 3 weeks ago. We did yesterday, which I think was probably, you know, a week or 10 days too late really, but it won't be disastrous. And I think we all need to remember as well that these crops absolutely love the sunshine, and we've had plenty of solar radiation this year, so I'm optimistic. But some of our gravelly spots, you know, I've got a couple of fields where they might do 6 tonne, but the rest of it, I think quite optimistic we should still be up there at sort of 8 or 9 tonne with a bit of luck. We'll see what happens next week. I think it's quite a hot weather forecast. And then yeah, we've just been doing quite a bit on our social media stuff actually during lockdown. We've just created a new website, so it's meadsfarm.co.uk. Just hopefully professional but also informative to the wider public if people click on there, because we've got a campsite as well. So it's just to hopefully covers all bases, and then trying to share a bit more about what we do for our social media stuff. Yeah, so that's it from me.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions, David, before we start?
I'm always amazed that Tom gets away with 2 sprays and a bit of hoeing compared to our sugar beet. I'd love to know what we're doing differently. We have discussed.
Yeah, I think we let the beet get quite big and then go with 2 quite big mixes quite close apart, sort of 5 to 7 days apart, and it just seems if you catch it right and the beet are growing fast, they sort of close the rows in time. But obviously next year with the loss of some actives, that might not happen. So. Yeah. And that was a decision about hoeing really. That, you know, another 2 herbicides was going to cost us, I think, about £30 a hectare plus the application cost. So I just decided that actually hoeing was going to work out cheaper and probably do a better job as well. So I think there might be a consideration going forwards. We might have to go back to some of these more mechanical controls with the loss of some actives.
Yeah, I suspect going forward there's an opportunity in our area where we've got a lot of sugar beet for someone to go and buy a very big 12 or 18 row mechanical hoe and offer it out, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's done.
So kind of the question back to you, Tom, for, you know, this crop's going to go and then establishment in the autumn. I've got some comments coming back, some people thinking about it's going to be 3rd week of October, some people saying they might be drilling 2 weeks earlier because they can't afford not to get the planned cropping drilled. So a difference of opinion already online, but you know, thinking about margins and beneficials, what are you both kind of thinking you'll be doing?
I won't be starting until probably the 1st week in October, which is when we normally do, and then we'll just, you know, select fields and pick where we go. I do think we're fairly clean for back grass at the moment, but I want to keep it that way. I think for us that would be about right. But it's just that compromise between doing a bit later and then, you know, we've had this hot, dry weather. If crops on this land don't have a good root structure, we just really suffer when we get weather like this.
Yeah.
So go on, David.
It did go on for us. I know if we'd started drilling 6-7 days earlier last autumn, the 650 acres we didn't get in until the end of January or first few weeks of January. We would have got in before Christmas. But I hope with a slightly bigger drill, slightly more simplified cropping, we'll go. But I will probably hold off to the 1st of October. However, there is an argument. We've got a lot of ground where we don't have black grass, and we're drilling winter barley. Is there anything wrong with putting that in that 3rd, 4th week of September? Maybe not. But I think it's every field is looking at the weather, the right conditions to crop, and we'll sort of see how we feel nearer the time, I think.
And just kind of thinking and following on from your comment there, Tom, about, you know, this year and what we're looking, and the rain possibly coming a little bit too late, you know, what would be your potential yield of crops and how far down do you think you'll be this year, is a question that's come in. Are these normal or 10 to 20% down, you know, with what you just said about your 8 tonne a hectare?
I think we're going to have a range. I do think I'll have a couple of fields on some gravelly land that might do, well, 6-7 tonne a hectare, but, you know, who knows till we get the combine in. But the rest of it, you know, it still hold on and looks reasonable. And like I say, we've had plenty of sunshine, and I think now with, you know, we did have 20 mil of rain yesterday, so if that helps fill the grain, it could still be okay, I think. But yeah, I don't think we're going to be massively down, but we were quite fortunate. We managed to get quite a bit of wheat drilled in the autumn, you know, a tine drill, and just pushed on and did it, and changed our plans a little bit. We did plough a couple of fields to allow us to get on, and I'm glad we did.
And what about you, David? Because you had a slightly different autumn to Tom.
We started off with our horse drill. I then bought Tom's old tine drill, and we kept pushing wheat in and oats in after sugar beet, powerhouse drills, all sorts with that. Anything drilled before December, I think, will be down slightly. It has been dry, and the rain, I suspect, has come too late for sort of oats and rye. I walked into winter barley 2 days ago, back the field that I had on the picture, and I was surprised at the biomass that was there. The grains are filling quite nicely. So I think anything drilled before mid-December is probably okay. You know, wheats that were put in January on chalky, cold fields that were very wet and then turned dry, yeah, they're going to be, I don't know, 60% of what they should be at best. Luckily, I've only got 25 hectares of spring barley, which we needed for an environment scheme, and we just kept pushing oats in all the way through into the end of January. So I haven't got any spring oats this year because we've had disasters with those, bringing sheep off double turnips and pulling ground up in March, April, and then putting oats in. That's not been a very good idea. So we've learned lessons from that. So harvest will be down, but as Tom said, perhaps not as bad as we feared a month ago.
And I think it's very regional, isn't it? It was really reflected, and we've just been running a series of business group meetings with all our guys virtually, and I think it's been quite dramatic, the differences across the regions and soil types this year. Good. Right, thank you very much, both of you. I think we'll keep going for now, but we'll bring you back in again later. So thank you for that update. So just moving on then to our Wisbech Monitor Farm and round to Suffolk, Suffolk Norfolk border. Richard, and would you like to take us through what's been going on your farm there?
Yeah, morning everybody. Just wait for the slides to. This is all my fault for adding too many pictures into the slide.
That's good.
So yeah, I thought we've got quite a lot to go through in mine. I thought I'd just touch on oilseed rape. We had about 25% of the field that was sort of stunted throughout the spring, which is what you can see in the left-hand picture. But the other 75% have grown absolutely fine and sort of smothered it out. Now, I think that's an effect from flea beetle somewhere along the line. And there you can see on the tailboard with the tape measure, the difference between them is quite significant. But yeah, on the whole, I'm fairly pleased with how it is. So then we also did quite a lot of rolling, which we don't normally do, of wheat fields, just to try and help sort of encourage some tillering on some of our lighter soils. So yeah, we sort of pushed on with that, and that seems to have paid dividends and helped some of the wheat crops out, especially with the following dry weather that we've then had. We've had a bit of a machinery change around. The weaving drill has now been sold, which sort of leaves us with our current one and only drill, which is the Verdestad, which we're quite, you know, the Verdestad can do what the GD can, but we're looking forward to sort of trying to drill beans, especially winter beans, in later conditions, which neither of those previous drills could do. So we've adapted a old combination drill into a front tank, which Teresa just had up. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This should give us plenty of flexibility to be able to have multiple different tools on the back of the tractor, which will allow us to go into various different situations and have a little play around and experiment ourselves really with our soils and systems. So yeah, and then very busy in May, as with Tom. We were making some hay. Unfortunately, we don't have the shed space to store it all, so we had to wrap it in plastic, which I know isn't very environmentally friendly, but it will certainly keep well in those, and yeah, our cattle will enjoy those. So I also just wanted to touch on some IPM, which off the back of last winter's meetings, it sort of got my brain matter thinking. And I don't know whether this is, you know, it's going to work or not, but we had some stumps which we dug out of an old ditch that were quite big, and we weren't really sure what we were going to do with them. And then I thought, well, I wonder if they'd turn themselves into put in the right place in a margin like this, in a flowering margin, for a bug hotel, and then help with predators sort of going out from that margin to try and help with a bit of IPM. So next slide, please, Teresa. So this is the same margin, just a few weeks later, and you can see the Phacelia and the spring triticale coming up, and there is some chicory and different things in there as well. So yeah, next slide, please. Thought I'd just touch on, we had our next batch of 70 cattle, finishing cattle came in. We had quite big discussions about this spring, because with previous sort of 12 months, we'd only really made about £5 a head. Yeah, it's sort of, it's been made mainly because mum and dad are still very keen on having the cattle on the farm, so it's a bit emotional still at the moment. But we're going to keep an eye on this one, just see how it runs. We do like the muck, and the cattle on the whole have been hitting all the top grades, but I think we'll probably end up running a meeting later in the year for these. So crop of wheat, this is probably going to be our highest yielding field. We've got some Extaze on the right and some Zayat on the left, so you can clearly see the height difference between the two. Yeah, really pleased with how they're coming on. First time growing winter beans. These winter beans, most of the pods are in the lowest, the low sort of about shin height, unfortunately. So there's a lot of stem there that's, I think because of the dry weather, has not allowed them to finish flowering. So, but yeah, they're growing well. And then I think this will be our standout crop of the year. We obviously did something right when we were putting the spring barley in the ground. We've got some cracking fields of spring barley. They're all tabletop level. Clearly managed to get the timing spot on with establishment, which is so generally quite key with spring barley. And despite a lot of the dry conditions that we've had, we've managed to get some good growth, and that should help. But unfortunately, we had an incident a few weeks ago where somebody decided that they were going to come and just do a bit of joyriding around the farm. So we've had 3 fields, a winter wheat one on the left. It was already struggling with the drought, which you can see they've just been going round and round. And then the one on the right, which is the same winter bean field you saw previously. So you can see some of the variation in those beans from the wet autumn that we'd had, but also just the damage that they've done. So I've got a better relationship with the police now. They are dealing it and trying to track down who it was. But yeah, we're a little frustrating after everybody's hard work of getting the crops through. And then something else that we've done just to lighten it up, I bought my own mill. We decided to get some wheat out the shed and try and make some bread and different things with it. And my daughter there tipping it in, and then with my wife's skills and my daughter, they've managed to make some lovely shortbread out of that flour, which actually tasted quite really well. I didn't say that, you know, in that way. I think she'd kill me if she heard me talk about it like that, but it did taste really nice.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. It's really wonderful to see your own product, isn't it? Especially lockdown, where everything's been hard to get a hold of. I just think that's a wonderful way to use the product. Definitely.
Found it quite powerful and enlightening, really, because I've never actually done that from something that we've grown, other than out of a veggie patch. But this is slightly different scale when you farming arable crops and bring them into your kitchen and take the whole process through. So definitely want to do more of it. Different appreciation, yeah, definitely. So your winter beans first time growing, what was that replacing in the rotation? What was the motivation for doing that? So it wasn't so much replacing anything at this stage. It was trying to dip my toe in the water with other break crops, struggling a little bit with the oilseed rape, with the same old thing as everybody else with flea beetle. So I thought, well, before we kind of get to that and kick oilseed rape out of the rotation, let's get some experience of some other break crops, because we've not had I've grown some spring beans before, but only literally the odd field now and then, not you know, not bringing it into the rotation, and also it gives me a good opportunity to not have to do too many cultivations, and hopefully you know, reduce those down and see how that affects things on the farm, with cost and workload. Yeah, definitely. And we'll ask you the same question we've asked the others. You know, I know it's been quite different in rainfall levels in Suffolk and things, but and you had big changes. Anybody that came to the Wisbech Monitor Farm will remember your cropping plan starting here and ending up quite a long way down by the time we'd been through the meetings. You know, what do you think the impact will be on your yields this year, and how are you going to manage that in terms of cash flow and rotation planning for next year? Yeah, so I mean, fortunately, our rotation was able to be fluid and able to adapt to the conditions. We'd managed to get some of the heavy land stuff drilled with wheat early on, which is what it was intended for, which then left some of the lighter land that was supposed to be going spring barley. That was how it worked around the farm. But we then took the decision in the winter or pre-Christmas, to try and drill some of that with some extra wheat. And some of those fields, one of them was one of the ones that got driven round. So you could see that because of the drought, those roots were obviously a lot shallower, and it suffered a little bit more. You know, before the damage, I would have expected that field to probably get to around the 7.5 to 8 tonne a hectare sort of area, which is still, you know, we've been careful with costs on those fields. We highlighted them early on, which ones we could push and which ones we just had to be a little bit more wary. So we've done a bit more of a managed fungicide program. We have also taken the view that we're not using insecticides this year, so we're nearly at our full 12 months without using any. We will obviously have to keep monitoring that, but you know, with most of them that are left only at 50%, you know, if then yeah, it's kind of Yeah.
Good, thank you very much. So you're back on later, so we might move on now to introduce our Wisbech Monitor Farm. Thank you very much. It's great to see what's been going on. So, like I say, I'm really delighted to welcome Andrew and Sam. They've had quite a different start to a Monitor Farm programme, and I'm not sure it feels real, Andrew and Sam, just yet. But here we are, and we've got a great contingent of people locally to you that have logged on to do it. So, and join us. So, yeah, pleased to hand over to you and to hear about your farm business. Over to you.
Okay, good morning everyone from myself and Sam for the new Wisbech Monitor Farm in East Anglia. Just want to give you a brief overview of our business and how we use our time as monitor farmers, hopefully to learn how we can improve our businesses together. Farm history as a family farm partnership. Grandparents moved to Walpole from Stowbridge in 1946. We managed to purchase the farm in 1997 that was my dad and myself. Sam's now part of the partnership as well. Today we farm around 700 hectares under the banner of Melton Son. Of that, 160 hectares is owned and the rest is on various FBTs. We have 5 stubble-to-stubble contracting farms covering around another extra 730 hectares. We also have, where we started really, we have contract applications which range from fertiliser sprays as well as cultivations and drilling where required. Next slide. Soil type. We've been monitoring soil health probably in the usual way, which everybody's been doing. Obviously, soil sample analysis. We've also been carrying out soil texture, health monitoring, and mapping using a couple of services available in the marketplace today. This is obviously to help us with our inputs, cultivations, as well as to quantify our soils. Soil type doesn't vary too much. We are a silty clay to a silty clay loam. You can see there that clay content is around 32 to 40%. Organic matter is okay, 4 to 5%, but with the clays, obviously it's a slow process, but we're looking at ways in which we can increase that. And move on to the next one. Fertilizer. Including applications, it's split between liquid and mid to late season granular. Obviously the later season potentially just to help on crop scorch. P is required on a regular basis. K levels are sustainable but without any extra applications, although we do sometimes, we have been looking at using spring potash to help with crop growth in the spring. Nitrogen fertilizer requirements, we use a Yara N sensor for our variable rate applications of nitrogen, and also in our it's new actually this year, in our spring barley crops, we're using a starter fertilizer which we apply down the spout with our new 750A drill, and we also apply compound granular application to the seedbed to help early root growth. That moves us on to crop rotation. Generally, we have 1 or 2 cereals followed by a break of beet, beans, and I'll put a question mark there for oilseed rape. We've been growing oilseed rape for a lot of years, and it's been providing some really good gross margins on our farm. Obviously, as everybody else, flea beetle has took its toll in our area. This year, for the first time ever, we've lost 50% of our oilseed rape, which is a big area to lose. In the past, we haven't really lost any. We may have a few patches on the fields, which wasn't as good. So that's something we've really got to look at going forward. I'll cover a little bit of that later. Soya, we have trialed soya for a couple of year. Just for simplicity, this spring we haven't got any in the ground. We only managed to get 30% of our winter wheat in the ground last autumn due to the wet conditions. We don't generally start drilling until mid-October for just to keep on top of the black grass. Yeah, we'll see from there. Spring barley is used as a blackgrass cultural control when taking on new land with any blackgrass issues. And also we do grow it on our home farms to try and keep on the top of the blackgrass control, hopefully relieving any reliance on, or too much reliance on herbicides, to obviously just keep a high control. Moving on to the next slide. Labour, have 4 full-time members of staff, plus myself, Sam, who will cover a couple of slides in a moment, and Dad on the arable business. This covers operations on the home farm as well as all of the contracting requirements, obviously, so we've got quite a high staff count. My wife Lisa runs the office, and Dad is very actively involved on the farm still. He's involved with cultivation and establishment ideas and any future developments, having a large influence on the progressive way we farm today, I have to say. We have 3 members of staff who carry out PCM soil sampling around the Norfolk and Cambridgeshire area, as well as expanding into other parts of the country. Sam, if you could just cover these slides. You're on silent, Sam.
Sorry about that. This is our fleet of tractors and machinery. It reflects the requirements for our own farming business as a whole, as well as for our customers' contracting requirements as well. If we can reduce some cultivation passes through to move into shallower tillage, then hopefully these machinery costs can be reduced in the midterm. We have a lot of live telematic data coming back from all of our machines, which is transferred directly to the office via My John Deere and to our office software, which does help with a lot of technical stuff we're trying to move forward in, fuel usage, trying to improve which areas we can speed things up and make costs count. That's this slide done. This is our list of cultivation machinery. There's a various array of it, and it caters for different cultivation techniques which we do at the moment. The most recent machinery purchases reflect our aim to reduce depth of tillage and a number of passes, which would be the Vadastat Carrier XL with the crosscutter disc, which we used recently to establish some cover crop.
Thank you, Sam. Precision farming technology and data management, using our existing technology to try out various variable rate applications, using some new and existing platforms available. You'll see here the photo on the left is a variable rate PGR application. It's a photo directly from the screen. That was one of my guys working in the field. I did a remote display access so I could sort of picture his screen in the cab to see what he was doing live, just to talk him through that something new we were looking at. And that was obviously sent wirelessly back to Gatekeeper using the portal. We also have an applied data map in the top right hand corner, which is actually from the job on the left, and the bottom right hand corner of the screen is basically, as probably a lot of you have, is a soil texture zone map, which we use for seeding and for soil analysis. Going forward, we're hopefully looking to use some NDVI web-based software, which we're trialing just to see where we can bring that into the business as well. Next slide. Storage. We have 2,000-ton grain stores. You can see the years they were put up there. One of them has underfloor drying system. This year we just recently put up a lean-to to one of the second grain store, which has a floor vent system, which is when we built the shed, we have the underground ducting, so the vents come up from under the floor just to make things easier at harvest, rather than having the fans on the top. So the fans will be fitted outside, and that's we've got an automatic system there for sensing when they need to be on. The rest of the season, that will hopefully be used for our machinery store. Obviously, our machinery equipment we've got quite a lot of we need to try and keep under cover, because obviously it's very expensive. So hopefully we'll use that for that as well. Diversification. Basically, this comes back from where we started. Contracting is a large part of our business. It evolved back when I left school in 1987. Seems a long time ago. We started with providing a low ground pressure ATV and trailed 12-metre sprayer service for local farmers. The picture on the bottom left corner. That seemed to go very well. The picture on the top left is a picture of my dad, which was one of our first self-propelled sprayer purchases many years ago. From that, it progressed into our first stubble-to-stubble farm contracting just a few years later, just from being out on farms. As I've sort of briefly spoke about before, on the right-hand side with the quad, we also provide a soil sampling service using 3 of these ATVs, predominantly for PCN sampling, covering now a large part of the country. Next slide, establishment and weather. That's really obviously looking at soils 19-20 with the weather issues we had. First photo on the left is spring barley, shallow tillage, a little bit similar to what Tom was showing earlier on with the shallow tillage. It's on the left-hand side, it was a very shallow tillage operation with our first year using the 750A. And just on the right-hand side of the same picture, you can see we tried a section where we direct drilled straight into the soil we had instead of doing anything at all. And as Tom said, it's just learning and doing the right thing. It's not always do nothing. It's something often helps. The middle photo is the next photo along is from our soya crop, which we harvested last year. It was late harvested. Actually, it did okay, but we couldn't get a wheat crop in because it was too wet at the time. So we've drilled it with a spring wheat, which is the next picture along, pretty much in the same place. You can see we left the combine wheelings in the field. We just couldn't do any cultivations in the autumn or the spring without potentially not getting any good establishment. So are we going to have a reduced yield? I suspect a small amount. Obviously, we've got reduced cultivation costs, so we'll see where that goes. Next, the slide on the right-hand side is from after sugar beet, late autumn, November. On that one, we decided it was too wet to drill at that time of the year. The seed was pretty much sitting on the surface of the soil. I wasn't happy with it at all. If you look at the picture, potentially I probably would be quite happy with that now. Were we too cautious? Did we make the wrong decision? Quite possibly on that field, but you do what you feel is correct at the time. As I said, we've only got 30% of a winter wheat area planned was drilled. So we've got quite a lot of spring wheat and spring barley this year. And obviously the conditions have been very challenging in the spring. Most of the crops look very good, not as good as I would like them, but with our heavier soils and some direct drilling or shallow tillage and direct drilling, they sort of held on to the moisture and looking okay. That takes us on to our last slide. Monitor farm ideas is a big long list of things we'd like to look at, and obviously hopefully that people who come and see us will have some ideas of what they would like us to look at as well in this area. The slide on the left hand side is from our telematics, and one thing what we would like to do is look at fuel use, some consumption tryouts using our telematics to look at the establishment costs and gross margins between the different methods of probably establishment going forward this autumn time. And then as well, we look at, we do a small amount of what I call controlled traffic farming, but only in its very basic form. We're using the same tram lines each year, along with tyre technology to reduce compaction, and we're keeping all the drills to the same. Obviously, we haven't got everything matched up with with the correct width to do full controlled farming, traffic farming. But it's something we're trying to look at, reduce compaction through tyres on the field. Cover crops, pictures on the right hand side at the top, just looking at cover crop. Actually, we've just drilled this earlier this week before the rains. We're looking to see how we can use cover crops with our high clay content soils, where, what and when to use it in our rotations. Again, this was a field that we drilled was after sugar beet, which we couldn't get a crop into at all, so it's been left fallow until now. So we're basically going to be putting we put a cover crop in there to alleviate some of the soil compaction in the surface, and then we're going to be doing some deeper cultivation subsoiling to alleviate damage at depth. The question, why now? Why not subsoil now? We've sort of done some digging and feel actually at depth, would you believe it's still too, we just feel it's still too damp to do those operations at the moment, so it will have to be later in the summer. Oilseed rape replacement. Do we look at better tools and understanding to try and persevere with the crop? It'd be interesting to see what people think and what we can do. Picture on the bottom right hand side, we have 2 weather stations with disease modelling. So we're looking to see how we can use that going forward, obviously to try and reduce our inputs if possible with other software provider models. I was listening to a webinar the other day, and they was talking about the Crop Monitor Pro, I think it's called, to look at doing the same sort of thing. So we'll see where that goes. We're also looking at drainage and payback tryouts, whether we can look at, we've done spent some money on drainage in the last couple of years. And obviously I think on our soils, we need to keep looking at that. Investment obviously is expensive, but we've got to see what payback we can get, and should we be investing more, really. And that pretty much covers our overview of our farm, and thanks for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you. And yeah, it's great. We've got all the questions coming in already, and it's brilliant to have your overview and to welcome you too. I think just that last slide shows just how much there is to look and discuss over the next 3 years. And we've had a steering group meeting, haven't we? We've got a steering group together, but we were really keen that, well, it was meant to be today was the day to get everybody's ideas of what you'd like to look at as well, wasn't it? So if anybody on here is near to the Wisbech Monitor Farm and got ideas over and above what Andrew and Sam have just said, please do feel to pop them into the chat, and we can look at them. We're excited about doing that, Andrew and Sam, aren't we, over the next 3 years? So plenty to go at. So I've got a few kind of questions coming in here. I'm going to ask you a couple, and then there's a couple of oilseed rape ones, and I've got an exercise for everybody to do on oilseed rape. So just quickly, which drill was used after the soya, Andrew?
That obviously was the spring wheat, so we used the new 750A John Deere drill directly into the soya stubble.
Brilliant. And so welcome to Wisbech. Which starter fertiliser are you using and at what rate? And have you done any other trials at other rates?
It's something actually we have used in the past with oilseed rape establishment. We have got a subsoiler drill, if you like, we've been using for quite a number of years with good effect on oilseed rape establishment, and we used a starter fertilizer there, and that was it's actually one called Primary P. It was applied actually to the cereals. It was applied at 10 kilos a hectare, and it's something I've got some trials in the ground this year looking at with some strips of unfertilized. At the moment I can't really see too many differences, but we'll take it through to yield, and it's something I feel that we need to look at with shallow stroke direct drilling and just see what's needed to help the crop along in the early stages.
Yeah, definitely. It's the age-old question, isn't it, what it needs? And, you know, it links to the work that we're doing on the strategic farm as well, looking at kind of boosting early crop biomass there. So there's some nice tie-overs between the two, and looking at how we can get this yield in the autumn when we're trying to manage delaying blackgrass and BYDV, and it's not easy for you. So oilseed rape, and Michelle, if you're ready in a minute, and we've got some questions for you as the audience on oilseed rape, just to kind of gauge what's going on there. Just while we're doing that, and maybe we do the two together. Sam's asking, would it be interested to know if there are any noticeable trends in the 50% of oilseed rape that was lost, i.e. was it herbicide use in the previous crop or anything along those lines?
No, we had on the establishment we had two methods this year. Our tried and trusted subsoiler method with the shallow legs, we use Tilso legs. Normally we've always had very good establishment, although we are broadcasting behind the leg. That was one field we lost as well. The rest of it, we decided conditions we didn't feel were it was a bit too, actually, would you believe, a little bit too damp on top at the time when we were drilling. So we actually went in with a John Deere direct drill and direct drilled the rest of the fields. Did we see any differences? Not what I could pick out, really. I can't put my finger on why the differences are there. I tried to look at varieties. We couldn't really see any big difference. We had 3 different varieties, couldn't see any differences in there. So I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Did you try companion cropping any of them?
No, it's something I've been looking at this springtime. If we decide to carry on going forward, I've penciled in one fairly large field of ours, actually potentially for oilseed rape, but it'll be very much a decision made at the time, very close to the time. The last few years been drilling sort of a little bit later. I didn't want to go too early for larvae issues, but it seems to me if you want to get it established, you really need to be going early, but then obviously suffer the consequences of larvae maybe. So there's a lot to learn on that one, I think.
No, brilliant. Right, Michelle, I think we'll do the polls at this stage. Give Andrew and Sam a bit of a break. I might ask them the questions over the top. So just to, because oilseed rape is such a massive question at the moment, our market intelligence team have asked us to gauge the feeling around the regions while we're doing this. So what's going to pop up in front of you is a series of polls. And just to kind of gauge your area, so like before, if you have to actually click on the screen to give your answer, and whether you just be able to feed this in. So the first question is, what percentage of the sown winter oilseed rape area that you put in last year will you harvest this year? So if you could just do that, that would be brilliant. The responses are coming through. And while you're just doing that, Andrew and Sam, I just wonder, there's a question here about how was the establishment with your cross cutter, and was it done through the chopped straw or was it baled?
Did you want me to answer that, Sam?
Some of it was after the sugar beet crop, like through the winter and left till the spring. That was a bit cultivated anyway, so that went directly through straw or anything like that. I mean, it was good, but we also did some more, which was, I think, if I'm right, Dad, that was directly after stubble, was it? Or was that slightly cultivated as well? I can't honestly remember that one.
Yeah, we had a demo of a machine last autumn time and did a small amount of areas in cereal stubbles, and that was cultivated ready for a spring crop anyway, although actually a couple of the fields were meant to go into winter wheat. Obviously we got the seed beds ready and then the heavens opened, so we couldn't drill it, so those fields were changed into to spring beans, and actually our spring cropping after shallow tillage actually probably looks better than where we did plough. So it's and we have actually purchased that machine just a few weeks ago, so obviously it's something we're looking to use going forward.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. So Michelle, if you want to just show us the results of that poll, or yeah, so about, yeah, you can see the results on the screen there. They're too small for me. so that was the winter oilseed rape. So if you want to go on to the next one, Michelle, and look at the spring winter. So next question, what percentage of spring oilseed rape area will you harvest? I don't know if anybody's got any spring rape. It's not loads growing around here. No, 100% none. Right, Michelle, do you want to keep going for the next one, please? No spring oilseed rape, not the favourite to be grown around here. So we'll go to the next one. So the big question, will you grow rape in 2021? I think this will be really interesting to see around the virtual room that we've got. Oh, it's very, very tight. 52% of you voted, and it's pretty much 49-51. It's going a bit higher. 56%, 55-45.
Maybe a few that are still undecided, like ourselves.
Yeah, we probably should have had a third option there, Sam, shouldn't we? Yeah, not as clear as yes and no. Okay, so yeah, so we got 55% yes, 45% no. So that's probably about what we're thinking about this year. And so the last question then, Michelle, for those of you that are going to put rape in, what area are you going to grow compared to 2020? Will it be, yeah, a 10% increase, less than 10%, less than 10% lower, and greater than 10% lower, or just the same? Oh, this is going to be quite interesting, Sam. There you go. This is where we're getting the real answers. Some are going the same. Some are going more than a 20% decrease. There's a few keen beans there that are going to go more than 10% more. So some people have still got confidence in growing it. Brilliant. We'll just give you a couple more minutes to do that. And then we'll share the results. So yeah, quite a big difference between you all, but yeah, the majority either growing the same or having at least 20% less. So thanks very much, everybody, for that. It's really useful to know for us going forward. Brilliant. Right, thank you so much, Andrew and Sam. I've got a few more questions for you, but we might just run through these tryouts quickly and then come back for a few questions at the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
So, Tom, if you want to come back again, we just thought we'd have a quick chat through the fungicide challenge that was going on and just share what's going on. I think it will be interesting this year with the changes and next year, particularly with CTL and epoxiconazole. So we've got a little video, haven't we, Tom? Shall I play that now? And then,
yeah.
Yeah, and then we can just quickly discuss what's gone. So we'll just load that.
Standing in the middle of our fungicide yield challenge, just looking at some of the plots, and they've had 2 applications already. Some people chose to put a T0 on them, some people left it untreated, and then there's been a range of T1 treatments gone on here, and we've been asked to submit our T3 treatments ready for later on next week or early the week after. No Bravo has been applied to, or no chlorothalonil has been applied to any of the plots, but some people have put some full pet on. So I've no idea which plots what and what treatments have had, but this is, the variety is Gravity. That's the flag leaf just coming out there. Yeah, you can see a bit of dried up septoria in the base, but most of the higher leaves on this one looking nice and clean. And we had about 23 mil of rain about 10 days ago, so the crops are looking pretty strong at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how these different fungicide programs come out compared to our farm standard program.
And so that was a good introduction, Tom. I think it's just nice to be able to see the field, isn't it? What we'd normally do on an open day. So yeah, do you want to just kind of talk through what people have done?
Yeah, so this idea, Teresa rang me, was it just before nearly the end of March, I think, wasn't it, when we were looking at whether we were going to zero fungicides. They did it in the west last year and thought it'd be a good idea to do a similar thing in the east. So 12 of us in the end, although there's 15 plots on there. For each crop growth stage timing for the key fungicides was asked to submit what they wanted to treat. We gave them some information about the crop and sent some pictures. And then ADAS have applied whatever anybody selected to put. It must be a nightmare to try and work out. And they're going to cost it. There's another bit to come on the end of this graph, and the end of this table for the T3 treatments, which some have gone with nothing and some have just gone with a bit of TEB. It's all going to be fully costed out, and then they're going to come and harvest it with a plot combine. So we'll see which one has proved the best margin this year. I mean, it's not been the year for a fungicide trial because, as I mentioned in that video, we'd had some rain then, and then since then we'd had nothing until yesterday. So actually the crop looks pretty clean, but it'll be interesting to see anyway what the results are. And you know, chatting about this with Teresa, and be interesting to see what other people think. Well, there's actually quite an interesting thing to do going forwards year on year. You know, completely independent, you know, trial and see how you know what the payback is on some of these fungicide spends. And obviously the biggest difficulty is you never know until afterwards. It's always in hindsight. So that was the general idea of it, and I think the results will be shared at some point later in the year, won't they, Teresa?
Yeah, we'll share them all later. And I think the big thing to say is because Bravo wasn't and CTO wasn't allowed to be used, I think it's challenged everybody, hasn't it? And there's a question coming in saying, is £50 a hectare for one fungicide application really worth the money? And we've talked about that quite a lot on some of our business groups, you know, the impact of that for next year. So I think it's been a challenge to do it this year, hasn't it? But actually I think it'll be interesting, and it's going to be what we're all looking at for next year. So, and we've had some quite innovative, so Andrew and Sam have had a plot, haven't they? Richard Ling from the Duxford Monitor Farm has had a plot, and that's all been decided as a steering group what they've done. So we've had some fun doing it, and hopefully that's something that if it's popular and successful we might be able to roll out so other people can have plots and look at it this next year. So brilliant, thanks Tom, definitely be sharing that as we go through. Great, so I'm just going to have Richard, are you ready for a rapid fire canter through your tryout, and then we've got time for a couple of questions as we go through the end. So over to you, Richard. There's some couple of interesting things are happening here.
Okay, so welcome back again, everybody. So we've been doing this tramline nitrogen trial. So we've got a couple of fields with some different products. 200 kilos of N farm standard is sort of just to try and keep things level as what we've done. And then we've added a product called Nurture N at 2 litres a hectare, and a product of Limus Clear, which is a nitrogen stabilizer, I think it is, off the top of my head. So we've got those two directly compared, and then on the other field we've done straight fertilizer, and then the claim with the Nurture N was that we should be able to reduce our N input by 30%. So Richard, being Richard, we decided we would go with this this theory and see if we could see any difference, and the results we'll be able to talk about later on in the autumn, hopefully, when we can all finally meet up. So if you can just see, so this field here on the left that you can see on the picture now, carry on one more. So at the moment, I think I can see the left-hand side is the darker green line, and the right-hand side is lighter green, showing the difference in the nitrogen application. So this was taken in April, just before the 15 mil of rain that we had at the end of April, which is when the second lot of fertilizer actually finally got washed into the crop. So that was from the first and second application. But now we roll it forward and you can see the ears of the crop. You'll have to ignore the volunteer barley. That's part of my change in cropping field. You struggle to see any nitrogen differences there in that field. So it's going to be interesting to see it roll forward and that. So.
And just a question on that that's come in. Was it with liquid fert that you did that, or was it?
Yeah, it's all liquid fertilizer. Yeah. So it gives us the ability to have it, 36 meters one product, 36 meters a completely different product. To the line, that's the beauty about liquid. So yeah.
Brilliant. Cool. And then do you want to talk about your stripe?
Yeah, so stripy field. So maybe if trees, you can move on one slide. So this is sort of like, we set this up last year a bit by accident, and we thought, well, let's run it through and see what happens, because it provided us an opportunity to try something that we'd never really tried before. So we've gone through, we've cultivated everywhere where the combine and balers and chasers and muck spreaders had been, which they'd managed, on the most part, managed to keep to sort of relatively the same lines, which was helpful to enable us to do this. And then we'd already established the catch crop before we did this cultivation pass. So hopefully, it provides some good data. So thank you, Teresa. So this was drilling it with the Verdistad. I was actually quite impressed with what the Verdistad actually was able to handle, even though the soil conditions were quite wet. Trying to drill two different, if we could set the drill up for all the cultivated field, that's one thing. But having to drill half and half at the same time is, you're expecting a lot of a machine. So, which filtered through, and we've actually got some plant counts that we did. So we drilled 322 seeds per meter squared into this field. And the plants, we were 55% losses on the cultivated area, as opposed to on the catch crop strip, we'd dropped down to this 35% of plants left. So from what was drilled. So, the drill definitely had an effect on establishment, which you can see as Teresa's rolling these forward. These strips were evident most of the way through the growing season. I'm not, you can see the darker lines. I think there's a carryover of nutrients from the catch crop, which have gone into the wheat crop. Don't know if that's because of reduced plant numbers, so there's more nutrients to go round, or whether it's just there was more nutrients in that part of the field. That's one of the big unknowns that I think we'll probably never find out. But we're going to take this right through to yield, and as you can tell with the ear numbers there, which are 768 majors, and then on the other catch crop strips there's 608 ears per meter squared. So we've just got an interesting picture here on the right hand side of the gravel. There's a gravel patch in this field which was droughting off quite badly before the 40 mil of rain that we managed to get a few weeks last week, which has helped things out no end. Is the left hand side is the catch crops side of the line, and the right hand side was the if you can just go back one, Teresa, the right hand side was the cultivated strip, and I think the catch crop side has held on just that little bit longer. And I know it's a little bit clutching at straws, but there's an effect there. So but yeah, sorry, this but as you can tell, on the most part of these fields, there was a good consist, the ears are there. So just a quick question to anybody out there. We've got an ear here where we've seen a lot of this sort of purpling, reddish sort of colour tinting, and it's not variety specific. So I don't know if anybody would like to answer that question for me as to what that might be, whether that's just because of the drought and then the plant getting some moisture and trying to relieve it, or whether it's to do with the cold winds and cold dry conditions that we had, or what it is really. So just a question to everyone.
Good. That's what Monitor Farms is all about.
Yeah.
We need the answer by the end of the session, everybody. Right. So if all the Monitor Farmers would like to just pop their webcams on, I'm conscious of the time, but we've had lots of really good discussion as we go through. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of the last questions that have come in, and then we'll wrap it up today. So there's some controversy going on here, Richard, saying you're asking a lot to expect cover crops to perform in 1 year, but you're using them in the rotation, aren't you?
Yeah, we are, and this is about sort of just trying to experiment really, and try and compare, you know, like for like. We had an opportunity in a field, so we kind of grasped it. It wasn't planned.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a question there as well about the cover crop trial. At what point was the crop destroyed, or was it drilled on the green?
No, that was sprayed off about 7 days before, so that's why it was still just green. So it was dying back.
Brilliant. So going right back to the beginning, and it's quite an interesting one for all of you really, with some questions about your statement, Tom, about kind of black grass, and about, you know, if you've got a historically clean field, then it might be fine to drill in September, but just remember the burden. And another one kind of saying, how accurate is your black grass recording? Are you confident to say a field has not had any black grass for 7 years and therefore earlier drilling? So I don't know how, I mean, maybe I'll just go around the room. Richard, how do you record your black grass areas?
Yeah, so I mean, we're probably not as big as most, so most of them are in here, but we do try and map them and keep on top of them that way. But we've been working hard over the last few years just with stale seed beds, and very much we don't drill fields now if we think that there's too much pressure there or there's a flush about to come. You know, we're watching, trying to time that stale seed bed as well as we can, and that for me is sort of like then backed up by we try and get the sprayer in the field and get the pre-Ms on within 12 hours of the drill leaving the field, because to me, you know, you can see it anywhere where that pre-M has slightly struggled, if it's on a bend or anything like that, you can see that black grass still just trying to come back.
Tom, as a question was aimed at you.
No, we haven't got fields I can say completely clear for 7 years. We've got low levels. I think this year delaying drilling because we were forced to has definitely had an effect, and we did make quite a mess getting some pre-Ms on, but it was the right decision. You know, it was wet, but I wasn't prepared to leave it and not put anything on. So yeah, but there's nothing that I would think, oh, I can go and drill that in September because it's completely green, free of black grass. I think that'd be foolish at the moment. But with changing our cropping and, you know, just doing cropping plans for next year, every field is assessed to see, you know, what that can take, and what our options are for weed control. And that's one thing with having sugar beet in the rotation as well. I think that has quite a big effect on, you know, being a spring crop, but also the different chemistry in that and being able to use other products on it. So,
Andrew, Sam?
We're generally drilling sort of early to mid October, early October on our fields where we sort of feel we're well on top of black grass, and definitely from mid to late October for any other ones. I feel that's worked for us very well over the last few years. Obviously, again, logging where black grass is, like Richard said, a lot of it's in here. Maybe we should be doing more weed mapping. And any fields which, like I said earlier, where we take on where we've got any serious black grass issues, they just won't go into a winter cereal. They'll go into a spring barley, not even a spring beans. Probably the only the other thing for if you're growing soya, you're not planting soya until late April, so that obviously has a good effect, as does any late drill crop. So yeah, we're finding that system works for us.
Brilliant, great. And David, black grass mapping or in your head?
Ditto with Tom, really. Agronomy notes for the year, keep my notebooks and you can look back, but you walk your fields, you get to know where they are. And like Tom, spreader cropping, you know, sugar beet and peas have been a huge sort of part of our armoury to be able to go through with different chemistries to take out black grass, spring cropping, sugar stubble turnips and drilling late, all those kind of things. We have a low level of blackgrass. We have little pockets of it, so we can target that.
Brilliant. Richard, a question for you, and I think anybody else chip in if you're doing it as well. So what's the range in expenditure for growing the best to the more compromised wheat crops that you've done this year? I don't know. We'll let Richard go first, but if anybody else wants to chip in.
Just on the expenditure side of fungicide applications, are we talking about? Oh, blimey, off the top of my head, it's not quite, it's just under the £100 a hectare mark for fungicide on the best fields with the most potential, but right down to sort of 50, probably on the lowest on the poorer fields, if you like. So anywhere, it's quite a big spread. This is probably the most, probably off the back of some of the work that Brian's been doing with the strategic, sort of being a bit braver on trying to recognise where that potential is and trying to pull back where we can.
And I think, I don't know, Andrew and Sam, whether when you've been doing your bit of fun on Tom's fungicide challenge plot, whether you've kind of thought about it differently. But I know, Tom, you said it's quite interesting having that trial there and having everybody put their own kind of things in and comparing it to your farm standard. And I think this year's been such a difficult year for everybody, hasn't it, knowing whether to rein back or not with what the weather's been. And I think, yeah, things like the fungicide challenge maybe actually will become more important going forwards. Actually there's some people that have spent very little this season. There's some people that have kind of done programs as normal. Yeah, good, right. So a thought maybe, Richard, is the purpling phosphate related, and are you going to analyse your grain for nutrients? Could be a good idea looking at that. Yeah, one of those things. So just a question for you all this year in this season, and something that possibly looking at developing a bit more. Any thoughts on what fungicide you think you would get the most out of, T1, T2, T3 this season? Do you want to go quickly around the room, and then I've got one question to finish. David?
Silter Extra always worked really well in our barleys and spring barleys and stuff. I've always gone quite well with that. We did have a bit of Bravo left, so that always helps. Yeah. Any thoughts this year, Andrew, Sam, what you might get the best return on?
Best return probably this year with the low septoria levels in general due to the dry conditions. It's probably been from yellow rust control, which is obviously one of the cheapest to control, but obviously everything is in hindsight septoria, but yellow rust is definitely where it's easy to control, relatively cheap, but well worth it.
Definitely. Tom, any comments?
For this season, we sort of split at T2. We did some with Revistar and some with Elatus, and I was quite pleased actually went with Elatus because of the longevity of the rust control with that. So yeah, that, and probably going forwards, I think T1 fungicides, making sure that you're dropping that septoria getting up the leaf rather than trying to firefight with it at T2.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it, Richard? Anything to add on that?
Not particularly. I mean, very similar to Tom. We ended up with a Elatus era over most of ours. Some of that was because we didn't really know the full cost of the Revistar at the time, so I wasn't. It seemed too high a risk strategy for us to go out there and start, ordering a chemical that we didn't know what the price was. So, and in a dry year, it sort of gave us that option. Yeah, let's be cautious. Stick with what we know.
Yeah. So a final question, because you're all monitor farmers and clued up on where you go. Might have to take a minute to think this one through, but I think it's quite interesting and relevant. So given the weather, the market and political volatility at the moment, what do you all think about the value of doing a whole business plan, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years? Do any of you do it? And kind of thoughts around that? I think, yeah, there's a lot kind of going on at the moment, and I know that's something that we're all covering in your monitor farm programs, but what's your thinking on that to finish the session? Who wants to go first? Go on, David.
So I've done a 5-year program and sort of budget for our cattle, and I'm going to start to do one for the arable part of the farm. It's really difficult to do. We've got such a fluctuation in prices. We don't know what's happening with Brexit yet. We've already had premiums slashed. We were told yesterday our premiums for certain crops slashed already. I think there's such a massive amount of unknown, and there'll be so many columns in a budget that you would just be taking an absolute flyer on at the figures. You can be sensible, but I think, not to be totally unoptimistic, we know it's going to be down whatever happens. But it's very hard to sit and do 3 years, and 5 years would be very, very difficult.
Do you want me to go next? I looked at this. My cropping plan changes daily to this time of year, depending on what options there are available. And, you know, with all the considerations of crop rotation and everything else, but also looking at, you know, markets can change, you know, overnight, let alone trying to predict where we're going to be in 5 years' time. What I did try and do last year before going into countryside stewardship was to see whether any of those options would work as break crop, like the 2-year lays and things like that. It didn't feel like they quite did, either timing wise when you could take them in or out, but maybe that's an opportunity, depending on what happens with elms going forwards. If some of those are a bit more flexible, I think there's definitely some little tweaks to those where we could all gain from environmental benefit and from a crop rotation side of things as well, if the rules were just tweaked slightly. I think there's always this worry that farmers are going to make too much money out of it, but if we're all profitable, then we're going to be far keener to do that. So I definitely think there's some scope with that.
Can I just add for that, for those of us who operate on land that's partially owned and contract farmed and FBT'd, rented, whatever, I think as we go forward, it's very difficult to predict where you might have rent reviews or where your rent might be as well. So again, trying to do a 3-year and 5-year budget and put in place your rent figures, I mean, that some years has as much an effect on anything as what you might spend on a fungicide or anything like that. So adds another unknown dimension, I would say.
Oh, David, it's hard, isn't it? Tough. Richard, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I'd just say I think that will probably come down to relationships, David, with the farmer, and you know, it'll be harder with new FBTs or contract farming arrangements. But I do think probably those that have got them will end up having to adapt in and change the agreement to make sure that both parties are still getting what is needed out of it. That will be the, you know, if not, you know, then the agreement will end up finishing, but probably for the right reasons, because you don't want to be running yourself into any debt with any of those sorts of agreements. That's not why any of us do them. So yeah. And for us here, we're trying to just be better risk managers, and trying to we've been looking at the farm for a number of years now, since the dairy cows left, sort of 8-10 years ago. So our whole farm is, you know, that made us really look at and analyze the farm, which we're constantly doing. And we're looking short term, but we also look very long term, because we have a sort of you've got to keep your eye a little bit on that long term ball, because farming is a very long term game. So soils and everything. So, and I think if your soils are in good shape, you can adapt to change a lot easier. So.
Andrew, Sam, I know, you know, you've talked through some of your business changes and ideas for the future. Is that kind of supported by business planning?
Yes, I mean, we look 1 year ahead on budgeting, and a little bit further ahead on machinery. Well, obviously a lot further ahead on machinery and things. One of the things which we've picked up, and I think many people have from monitor farms and everything else where they've been to, is fixed costs comes out on top of something which we all need to look at, and that's definitely something we're looking to do. Obviously, you see from a few of our slides that hopefully we're looking to reduce machinery costs without obviously any detriment to yield. Yeah, that's a big part of it going forward, I think.
Yeah, none of you have. I'm upset with you all, but I've got a shout out here: farm bench and benchmarking and knowing your costs. Come on, guys. But I know it's a big part of you all, and I know actually it has made a big difference. David, you mentioned it earlier with Harry and the machinery cost calculator. Richard, you know, I know you've drilled down into the labour and machinery reviews a lot, haven't you, and used benchmarking. Tom, you know, this time last year we were sat looking at your rotations, weren't we, and whether sugar beet was still viable, you know, doing it. So yeah, lots to do. And Andrew and Sam, I know that that's something that we can't wait to get in, and I know Harry's looking forward to the discussions on kind of fuel and telematics and data management, and we'll all take a keen interest in that going forward. Brilliant. Thank you so much. A really useful discussion, interesting, good to hear what you're all up to. And I think based on, I've got 10 or 11 business groups now covering across the region. We've all done an hour-and-a-half session going around the room, and I know the discussions that we've talked about this morning are echoed across the region. So they're all useful questions, which is all what the Monitor Farm programme's about. So just to round off this morning, as ever, I've got my couple of thoughts at the end to finish this morning. So just to say, there's a whole lot of resources that are available for you. I thought now's the right time of year just to say, and we've got this harvest toolkit, as we call it, on our website. If you Google AHDB harvest toolkit, it's got everything you might want about mycotoxins, grain storage, grain drying, pre-harvest glyphosate, should I bale, should I chop, the recommended list links. If you've got new harvest students starting, which I imagine many of you will in the next couple of weeks, I want to give them a page to go and have a read through. It's all on there, so I'd say make the most of that. I know many of you, and we've just discussed cropping, and next year the recommended list is obviously there for you to use. Don't forget we've got the new variety selection tools that you can use, and there is now an app that you can download for the recommended list information as well. I'm conscious again a lot of you are buying fertiliser and looking at kind of cropping and nitrogen cover cropping manure for next year, so the nutrient management guide is there as well. Soils, we haven't come up too much this year. We've mentioned, Andrew and Sam mentioned about their subsoiling. Again, if you're looking at monitoring your soil structure, looking at, you know, mould drainage and wider, that's all available. And then, as Charlotte mentioned earlier, the BYDV tool. There's a new cabbage stem flea beater report coming out, Charlotte, as well, next week. I think you said that available, and so much more. So it's all on our AHDB website. Do let me know if you can't find anything. I'll point you in the right direction, and make sure you use that. Just a quick thought, a lot of the topics have covered, and I've had some brilliant feedback about the work that we did in Strategic Farm Week, a lot of the webinars, the videos, the podcasts, the how-to resources, and just to say they're all still there. Again, if you Google AHDB Strategic Farm Week or go to this link, they're all there. All the videos and the webinars are all recorded, and those recordings are all available. So if you've got another wet day, I don't say that too much, we don't want a wet harvest, but if you want to have a look back at that, they're all available for you. And then just to say, we've got a couple more webinars coming up that might be of interest. A bit delving into deeper on the recommended list. We've got a webinar on the 24th of June. 9 o'clock is looking at wheat, 7 o'clock is looking at barley and oilseed rape, and that's with our AHDB recommended list trials team. And then Harry is back talking about pre-harvest preparations on the 1st of July. So I think that's all for me to say. Just to say, as you leave today, there'll be a little survey. It's the first time we've kind of done these in this kind of form. It would be really interesting to hear your thoughts, good, bad or otherwise. So pop them into there, and we'll look at that. But hopefully we'll be back on farm, on a farm near you before long. This webinar has been recorded, so if you want to look back at anything, you can. And just finally to say, you know, as ever, I'm always here if you've got questions, thoughts, want to find something, can't find something, ordering publications, anything else, just let me know, drop me an email, give me a ring. I'm here to support you. Everybody's still on Twitter, and thank you very much for this morning. And I think a big virtual round of applause, please, as we would always do, to our fantastic monitor farmers. Thank you all for giving up your time. It's been a really interesting morning. We look forward to seeing what harvest does and following up on all that good work over the winter, and following your progress over the next 3 years, Andrew and Sam. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to Charlotte and Harry for sitting in the background, and we'll see you soon. Good luck, happy harvest, good luck for cultivations. See you in the autumn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.